Hello, myself Sunil Ramakrishna. Basically, here this video number is that is 20 number PHP part. So in this basically we were discussing the different types of variables basically. So that is local variable, global variable, and static variable. So let's basically start the one of the person told that variables means what basically. Variables basically is temporary storage of the program basically. When basically one website is ongoing, the websites basically, for example, one user basically connected to the website, there basically the local variable, the variables basically comes into the picture. When he basically close the browser, that time this all variable basically gets over basically. So there basically the time period basically is up to this only. As the browser closed, the variable will get disappear from the memory basically. So that's basically is the variable basically. So one of the person to the how basically this connects to the real world basically. In 100 city basically, which is new version basically introduced, how the local variable, how the variables comes into the picture. So few people told that basically the long life and the temporary life basically. For example, one person basically got the birth, he will basically he will not get the second birth basically. So that basically we can use as a variable basically, as a local variable. Means you can say as a variable basically, global variable, local variable, static variable. As basically his life basically got over, assume that basically he got 95, 96, he basically died, then basically his life is over. He will never get the human birth basically. That basically you can use as a variable basically. That is basically the real world example basically. That is basically the temporary basically. Temporary and permanent basically data is there. This is basically comes into the temporary picture basically. This comes into the temporary picture basically. So that basically is the topic basically which is ongoing. So global variable, local variable. So here basically the global scope basically. If you declare a variable here, then basically it will create problem basically. Local scope basically, that you know basically. This is a local variable which is basically inside the function basically, and you can access here only basically. If you try to access outside basically, then basically it will generate the error basically. So that is basically the local scope basically. That is the local scope. So within function basically you are declaring the variable, you are assigning the data, but when you access the data basically outside the function basically, it will might it will generate the error basically. So one person told that, yeah, why basically this type of creation basically somebody has created without any reason basically, anybody creates anything basically. So what might be the reason basically? So one person told that basically, if you are doing some programming basically, if you are doing some stuff in the programming side basically, you required basically some local variables, you require the variables basically, where you can basically assign the data basically. So one of the person told that without assigning the data or without assigning the variable data, the programming basically can't be work basically. Then one of the person told that that's very dangerous, because when you go to the upper side basically, upper side means very high level programming basically. I take basically has taken the example of one person told that basically power supply basically is ongoing. In that power supply basically somebody hijacked the power data basically. That basically comes into the very high level transaction. For example, Tata Group basically is doing the transaction of 1 lakh crore. somebody basically hijacked that data basically. So Tata Group basically, do you think basically who anybody can hijack Noval data basically? That is not possible here basically. Who can hijack the Noval data basically? Anybody can do this basically. So one of the person told that only satellite group basically can do. But satellite group also basically can't hijack that basically. Is it possible basically? Then one of the person told that mostly basically it's not possible basically. Then how basically they hijack the data basically without accessing the Noval basically, because Noval is the roadmap basically. When you are entering into the any database or basically doing the hijacking the programming without Noval basically, you can't hijack the stuff basically. That basically hijacker group basically says. Then one of the person told that yes, yeah, basically. One person told that yeah, the currency basically system basically got hijacked basically. The one of the person told that how that is possible here basically, because to generate the currency data basically it takes many time basically. It takes demand supply data, it takes lots of collection of data basically have to be collect. After that basically the population basically gets connect, the population blood cells basically gets connect. After this everything basically the visa group basically connects into the picture, that which currency basically the exchange is basically on, exchange means conversion basically is ongoing. After this everything basically the currency basically comes into the picture. So do you think basically this type of data basically can be hijacked? That is not possible basically. So one of the person told that without Noval basically whenever you boot the data, DOS basically comes into the picture. That basically is the name given as a Noval basically. In really basically it's a novel basically, but lots of people say that it's a Noval is a good word basically. So one of the person told that Tata Group basically has created this booting system basically, right? So they know basically that HP database, HP computer basically their Noval data basically is good. Whenever basically entire world basically in entire world HP computer and the laptop and the server basically when it gets boot, that time basically from this 100 city basically the power supply are passed, then only basically you can able to boot. So one of the person told every week basically assume that basically every week basically the power supply is taken from that 100 city to boot the HP computer, to boot the entire HP computer basically from that 100 area basically the power data basically are taken. So one of the person told that yes, yeah, basically it's taken from like this only. It's 100% correct basically. So how dangerous basically it is. So one of the person told that the power companies basically they are basically doing nothing basically, they are just passing the data basically, nothing else basically, because it's very dangerous to directly interact with the city. That's why the power company basically gets the power data from the nuclear power company, energy companies, lots of basically process happens, then basically the data are converted into the gas format, and that gas format basically is the real the power data basically. So one of the person told that then what the MGVCL basically are doing. That is also a question. One of the person basically literally asked the question. Then MGVCL basically क्या कर रहा है? Then the answer is basically the land data basically. Without land basically you can get the power. ONGC like basically gas companies basically, the energy companies basically, they basically passes the power supply real data basically. Then one of the person told that yeah. So then basically what actually the power companies are doing. One person basically literally asked the question basically because he want to do the cost cutting basically. Just see basically up to what level the cost cutting basically are connecting. The person basically who are into the cost cutting basically they basically can understand what actually I want to say. So next video basically is that only basically.